Hello everyone, welcome to our second module of the semester. So this module is a big module. It contains a lot of the learning material that we are going to need as we move forward in our autoethnographic research project. So this is all about the research, but also about the writing. Before I get into this and walk through the assignments and the activities, I did want to pull up the calendar really quickly to just remind you how quickly we move through this really fast semester. So our module 2 is going to encompass this week and just into next week. But if you look ahead at our module 3, that's when we are going to be submitting our peer review, our rough draft for the peer review, and our final draft. So do not wait until all of these their smaller assignments, these scaffolding or foundational assignments, don't wait until you are finished with those before you start drafting your essay. Start writing notes now. Start coming up with a community as soon as possible. Reflect on those behaviors, name the behavior, and start thinking of memories and stories of times when you've witnessed that behavior right now, and start writing those notes because we just don't have a whole lot of time to lose in this quick semester. So if you look here, I'm looking down at the module, and right here is where you found this video, but here is where I have the instructions again, and I also have those student examples. Look at these and you can look at them as a fellow writer. Look to see how these students wrote their essays, not just what they wrote about. One picked a community of fellow dorm dwellers, people who lived in his dorm. The other student picked a community of their local theater community. And so they both identified a behavior within those communities. They brought in outside sources, but their main type of evidence was storytelling. Stories of times when they witnessed that behavior. So remember, as we move through this assignment, that you are not the subject of this essay. You are not the main focus. The community really isn't the main focus. The community, I like to describe it as almost the petri dish that contains the people that you are observing. The whole goal is to identify a behavior and then convince your intended audience through your essay that that behavior happens and that it is meaningful. That is all you're going to do here. And so the main type of evidence you're going to be bringing in are stories of times when you witnessed that behavior. That's going to be the most persuasive, the most compelling type of evidence you can bring in your firsthand knowledge, your firsthand witness. And so storytelling is key here. But the first thing we have to do is find that community, determine that community. And so right here, I have got just a little page that describes what the community is and what type of communities work. I will open this up in a new tab so you can see, so I can jump back. This just describes what a community is and gives you some ideas. I'm also sharing a brainstorm list of communities that was compiled by my in-person classes. So this is not a list of communities that you have to pick from. You do not have to pick any of these. This is just provided to you to give you some kind of idea of all of the kind of communities that we belong to. Because I have a lot of students think, well, I don't belong to any communities. Well, yes, everybody belongs to a community. You're all part of the Paradise Valley online community. And so these are just some ideas to help get your mind, loosened up and thinking about what kind of community you can pick. And once you pick that community, and it can be a community that you belong to right now, or it can be a community that you belong to in the past, as long as it's a community that you can recall and think about and reflect on the interactions, the behaviors that you witnessed in that community, so you can pick one that's meaningful, that means something to people, that matters to people even outside of the community. And it can be a positive behavior. It could be a more problematic behavior. It doesn't matter. It could be a mixture of both. The next thing we have here is all about storytelling, because our stories, like I said, are going to be our key types of evidence. And so being able to share a personal experience through storytelling in a way that is really persuasive, in a way that invites your reader into your memory so that they can envision it as they read about it, that's powerful. That is compelling. That is really persuasive. And so right here I have some videos, some really good videos on storytelling and how to write stories in a way that is persuasive. I think the next thing is all about researching. Okay, so we're going to need one. I suggest you only use one because your stories are going to be your main types of evidence. But if you want to bring in two, that's absolutely fine. But no more than two outside sources. And so you're going to be bringing in sources that will kind of help support a point that you're going to make or provide definitions or background or anything like that. If you are wondering how to incorporate or use those sources, look to the student examples. Look to the Lillian Rivera essay that we're going to be reading this week. They are great examples of how to incorporate the types of sources, outside sources you can bring in, and how to use them, how to integrate them. And so there's not any type of source that is going to be required. We do not need to go out there and grab peer-reviewed articles for this because we were writing to a Paradise Valley student body, and so that might not appeal to that group. It might. You can bring in those types of articles, but you don't need to. And so I've shared here a video on finding good, credible sources just on the internet. There's a lot of junk out there. There's a lot of material that does not meet the criteria expected in college research papers, but there's also a lot of really good stuff that you can find. And so there's a video here on how to determine what is a good internet source. So watch over that. I also, even before I get into the activities, I also invite you to look ahead at our Module 3, where I have another great video on just the whole rhetorical or persuasive situation of this project and what kind of thesis we're going to incorporate. So that is also a great video. And so that's provided next week, but do not hesitate to watch it early. I think it will help you. This week, as far as activities, we've got the syllabus quiz. Everybody needs to get 100% on this quiz. This is an open book, open Canvas. You can even email me or send me a Canvas message asking me about one of the questions. And you can take it as many times as you want, but I'm going to ask that you all get 100% simply, here I'm going to open this up, simply because there are points in the syllabus and in the course that I want you to know about. Okay, and so if you there are going to be a few questions at the end that are fill in the blank where I will need to give you the points for that. And so 100% will actually be 16 points out of the 20, but work for that. And let me know if you have any questions on that. But everybody needs to take that. Okay, the second activity this week is that Lillian Rivera essay that I mentioned earlier. It's a popular press piece. That means it was written for to be published out there in the real world. It was published on BuzzFeed, and it is a fantastic example of autoethnographic writing. This author, Lillian Rivera, she examined one of her personal communities, which was her extended family, and she identified a behavior that she found problematic. And she wrote about it, and she brought in a couple outside sources, but her main evidence is storytelling. Okay, one of her stories was a scene, a really great scene that she opened up with. Some of her stories were just summary of memories, which is also good, as long as you have the mixture of the both, as long as you have at least one story that's written out as a scene. And so I'm going to ask you to annotate this. And there's some instructions on how to annotate. Right here's a great guide on how to use Canvas to annotate. I'm going to ask you to highlight a few things and look for a few things, add a few marginal notes, and you will simply be using these tools right here to annotate. Okay, these guides will help you understand how to do that better. But that is a great professional example of autoethnography. Yes, I want to leave. And then the final thing that we're going to be doing this week is I want to know what source. I want you to send me an example of a source that you are thinking about using. Okay, this isn't a contract. You can change your mind, but I want to at least know that you are searching for sources. Okay, so I'm going to ask you for the full MLA citation, not just the link. I want the full citation. And I want a short paragraph explaining to me how you're going to be using this source. Okay, why did you pick it? How are you going to be using that? And then we will get into our module 3. So feel free to look ahead. Let me know if you have any questions on our module 2 content. And have a great week.